Now, yeah, it's a Sunday afternoon, and Johan has asked me the last time that we had our discussion that he wants some time off. He's got some problems with his eyes and so forth. And tonight, he's going to talk to us about education, SASA, smart cities, border protection, and the drugs. Johan, welcome on the channel, and thank you very much for your time. The floor is yours.
Colleen, welcome. Thanks. Yeah, a lot of things have happened. Before I go into that, let me just start with Stellenbosch University, my alma mater. What has been happening there, I've been watching what's been going on over a time with Professor Wim de Villiers. He doesn't rate very high in my books, as a matter of fact. He's a person I consider that should be very, very deeply investigated. I mean, him and Nikki Newton-King, Stellenbosch was also her alma mater. She's from the JSE. The fact that they, according to Judge Cameron, the Chancellor, deleted certain paragraphs on proposed situations pertaining to Wilgenhof. I mean, this is nothing else but a witch hunt. It's been quite a while since I've been in Stellenbosch. I've been there from the period 78 to 81. Wonderful days. Yeah, I did not only study, I did a lot of things. But in any case, the main thing is today, what I understand is very, very little discipline left on the campus. It is an unruly bunch. Now, I guarantee you, I have an expertise pertaining to investigation of corruption, investigation into procurement. And what I've seen at Stellenbosch at this stage, and I'm saying this very clear, it will take me a week to come up with the first serious fraud cases if I am to investigate the administration of Stellenbosch. And that is what I've seen. I've been the investigator, and I wrote the report on the Bombela Soccer Stadium in 2009. The fact that nothing was done about it is another issue. Johnny Moslala was my one friend in Pretoria, and then Jimmy Moslala was the speaker in Bombela, with whom I worked very closely, and he was assassinated when he was shot in the back when running from the gate at his house. So there's a lot going on in Stellenbosch, and I, for one, are starting to get really pissed off about the situation. Nikki Newton-King writes about transformation. I think she should stop transforming at this stage a little bit, because this country has been transformed in 30 years from a pyramid to the top to a shit heap at the bottom. Because the one thing is very clear, the ANC are not allowed to be a success. And that is because the ANC is run by criminals. The ANC has been hijacked. State capture has been done by criminals. I've been at the receiving end of massive frame-ups by white lowlifes. Yes, Afrikaners, with their Freemason little rings in the military. So I know, and I've been going through it, and I'm pushing very hard. I mean, this has taken 12 years from my life. How they've tried to destroy me in all manners of speaking. They've destroyed my credibility internationally. I have been accredited by the American Congress to deal in weapons of mass destruction. And then I see how the chief of the Defense Force acts at a ceremony in Russia. He cannot even march. He cannot even drill. But he was the one guy who made an affidavit saying, as chief of special forces, it was his prerogative to cancel a contract that no weapons of mass destruction, such as RPGs and other weapons which were legally imported, can be stored at special forces for demonstration purposes. But he becomes the head of the Defense Force under Cyril Ramaphosa.
Yes? Ask you something. I'm just going to make a statement and you can just say yes or no. I have come to the conclusion this past week that South Africa as a country is very, very close structurally to Haiti. The country is run by gangsters.
You're quite right, indeed. Remember, what happened with Haiti? I'm digressing a little bit, but it all ties in the end, you'll see. In Haiti, they killed off all the whites, all the French on the sugar plantations and the rest of the whites. And who was Haiti's big friend? Thabo Mbeki. Thabo Mbeki, the man implicated in the arms deal. Thabo Mbeki, whom I have implicated in high treason charges with the Hawks. And I am pushing this. Thabo Mbeki, Moletsi Mbeki, along with Ivo Reshikovic and the stealing of 320 rattles by paying a fraction of the price for it to be exported to Jordan and the balance pushed into their hands. And this comes back to the issue of what we're talking about, education. Education in the 70s, 80s, when a man reached standard 6, the National Party took him from school, they gave him money and they gave him a car and made him a teacher. The first thing he did was bedded the young girls. And this is the situation. Black education wasn't supposed to be superior education. Although, make no mistake, what people do not understand was the amount of money spent by the National Party government on education. But their main problem was all these old dominis, the priests that were a failure in the churches, were put into this department as so-called directors and chief directors. You must remember one thing, when people come with such baggage, they are not going to be your best people. Education, you need your best people. Wendy Luhabe, from Wippold Women Investment Portfolio Holdings, and also known as Thabo Mbeki's Nyatsi, she was Sam Shilowa's wife, and sitting on the Brenthurst Foundation, by the way, said in newspaper interviews, education for her was better under apartheid than in the current system. The main situation is there's a lot of good people. Amongst the black people, I find education, they are much more serious than amongst the whites. The white children are spoiled brats. They got no discipline. What do you think's going to happen? I mean, the white children can't even spell. When they write a letter, it looks like an alphabetic that put this letter to paper. So our education service is in a total mess. And the one reason, therefore, is it lies with the unions. Yes.
In my discussion with Chris Wyatt last week,
Yeah.
we talked specifically about education and how the education standards took a nosedive in America and the same here in South Africa. And I mean, I am of the opinion that the destruction of education is part of Triple X's plan, how to get societies under their control.
I don't know if you've ever come across the works of Alvin Toffler.
No?
He writes about the future. And Alvin Toffler specifically says, you are supposed to be educated so that you can be a part of a productive workforce. You are not supposed to be a liberal thinker and be able to work for yourself. You are supposed to fit into a system to make money for certain people, such as you call Triple X.
Yeah.
As I say, in my situation dealing with special forces in the logistics, we used to call them jam stealers because really they got promotion, but way above their station. And they were all running around with Freemason rings on their finger. And they wanted to tell you about the law. No wonder. Things are the way it is, you know. And it is not the blacks doing this or the whites doing this. It's the black and the whites doing this. The incompetence is so rife, you can't believe it. People who are really trying, black and white, pink and blue, Indian, any color of the hue, they all complain about one thing, how they are being victimized and minimized. You know, so you're talking about education. I've been watching, you've been talking about a lot about Gaza and Hamas. And I've said it before. It was Kissinger's strategy in the 70s that the Muslims in Lebanon would breed. They would outbreed the Christians so that in the next election they could take over the government, which eventually happened. Because every Muslim is entitled to have 4 women. All the people I know that came back from Iraq has got the same story. Too many children, and the women are being treated like second-hand citizens, if second-hand, but being treated like low life. And this is what happened in Gaza. Remember, The Palestinians are not welcome in Jordan. In 1959, they were thrown out of the country because they were creating so many problems. They nearly led to the fall of the Jordanian government. Then they moved with Yasser Arafat into Lebanon. We know what happened there. But what you don't know is that some of Arafat's money ended up in Johannesburg at the Knox safes, and it was managed by certain ANC people. The same safe where the Singh guy from Transnet kept 4 boxes full of cash. And this is the thing people don't understand. People don't understand the affinity between the ANC and the Muslims, because under Ben Bella in Algeria, South Africans were in those camps. They were being trained. General Mwepe at CJ Ops in 2012 and 2013 described his training in those camps when I was there with him, with Mohammed Tag. Mohammed Tag was Gaddafi's personal aide, who then fled Libya after Libya, the Libyan leader Gaddafi started killing them off, and they made peace many years later. But the situation is that there is a very close relationship. Now, what is happening in Hamas, with Hamas and in Gaza? Look at the education. Again, look at the situation with the health services. Hamas is using the hospitals as cover to do what they want to do. Education is being used as an excuse to do what they are doing. My question is, what the hell is happening? Is it because they're using this to create sympathy? And that is the only thing I can think of. Yahya Sinwar is being claimed to be a martyr. No ways. Yahya Sinwar was not assassinated. Yahya Sinwar died in a firefight with Israeli reserve forces. Yahya Sinwar was the main brain, master brain on 7 October 2023's issues when they killed all those civilians. But the Hamas leadership sits in Doha, millionaires, multimillionaires, and they are manipulating the Palestinians. When we look at education, our education is falling so far short. Where did the Crusaders go? And the Knights Templars? Where did they get the gold that made them so rich? They all went to Palestine. It wasn't just to protect Christian pilgrims. They looted the Arab world. They took it back to France. In the end, when the King of France murdered 1,800 of them, the rest of the Knight Templars fled to Scotland, where they joined the Scottish Masons, and then eventually they joined the English Freemasons. You don't read about these histories unless you scratch very, very deep. And this is what I'm saying. Our education is lacking. When you talk to people and ask them to do a simple mathematical calculation, they can't. And as I said, the spelling is so bloody atrocious. When you go back to the issue of smart cities, George in the Western Cape, where Mark Liftman was killed during this weekend, the drug lord out of the Western Cape, is actually a smart city. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you are being followed, you are being filmed, you are being monitored. When are you going to start with the issue that you cannot travel unless you have a pass? That is what smart cities can do. When you look at the situation pertaining to everybody else, in Dubai, if you apply for a visa or a resident visa or a temporary visa, whatever, they send a drone to your place of residence. And if you're not there, they will monitor you to see where you are, in which vehicle you're traveling. As you stop at home, the drone is behind you. It drops off the documents and it will come the next day so that you, after you sign and seal it, you can put it back on the drone for delivery. Disturbing, makes you wonder. The issue of smart cities. I mean, Leon Schreiber is very much going on about smart cities. The main thing is Department of Home Affairs have always been a problem under the National Party, under the ANC. For a simple reason, there's too many rules and regulations. And there are too many people. Life is always about relationships. It's not about bribes. It's about relationships. Bribes do come into the picture, make them mistake. But a smart city, everything must be done with regard to the consequences, and look at the long-term consequences. if you are to be traced by your cell phone wherever you go at any time, because your cell phone, even if you switch it off, is not off. That it has got an IMEI number. It can be traced. Your movements are being detected. If you incur a traffic violation, you can be traced. If they don't like what you're doing, you can be traced. If you don't like your face, you can be traced.
Is jy nog daar, Johan? Okay, jy het vir my gesê dit kan getrace word.
For instance, in order to discredit me, I have been described as Boerenmag Johan Erasmus from Krugersdorp. I don't come from Krugersdorp. I come from Cape Town. I'm not Boerenmag. Boerenmag doesn't exist. You do have crazies, make no mistake. You do have people who's got some funny ideas. If you really want to take over a country, there's only one way, and that's a financial way. That's economical way. Boerenmag is nonsense. But as long as defense intelligence carries on with Boerenmag, they have a budget. There's a group of agents of intelligence, defense intelligence, out of Rustenburg with Johan Erasmus in the front. They're involved in gold smuggling, melting of stolen gold, and money laundering. Of course, and they split the money with their agents in the defense intelligence. Our intelligence services are more focused on committing crimes than preventing crimes. That's why in 2013, with the issue in Car, when our troops were there under William Dixon, when the chappie from Defense Intelligence wrote a report to say the Seleka is very highly trained and they have got heavy weapons, the rest of his colleagues were sitting on the hotel in Bangui drinking beer, and they said, no, he's wrong because the Seleka has only got weapons. Seleka was financed via a front company from the French. In the end, when the plane left South Africa, the first illusion was 6 Hornet fighting vehicles, a driver and 4 men on it fighting. They drove in Bangui straight off the plane into the battle. And they took out 19 technicals. A technical is a 4x4 with a 12.7 by 108 millimeter machine gun or a 14 millimeter machine gun on top of it, heavy machine guns. They took out 19. Major Silva, the 2IC under William Dixon, told me that he counted 1,200 bodies on the battlefield afterwards.
Net so oomblik.
Yeah.
You are saying that it's been destroyed. To who did that belong?
What?
These machine gun things, technicals.
The technicals belong to the Selekas.
All right, and the 1,200 dead people also belong to them.
Exactly. We don't know how many died because of injuries. Because remember, if you get a bad injury, the chances of you dying of gangrene in that tropical environment is very high.
Okay.
All right. But the main thing is, I think that was also the last time our military could take part in a issue with a positive outcome, because at this stage, our military is an absolute excuse for a military. If you look at it, we got 71,000 people in all branches of the defense force, but we've got 400 generals. America's got 1.2 million people in their defense force with 72 generals. What is wrong with the picture? And everyone earns on average over 1.2 million rand a year, but they're a general. In 2014, I penned a document with the assistance of ex-special forces for border protection. We made a presentation to General Glatswayo of CJ Ops at Blenny's, which is the military headquarters in Pretoria, 3 or 5 stories underground for that matter. And in that issue, I specifically wrote and I said, stop transporting 2 tons of post toasties on a 20-ton truck. Buy it in Pietersburg, Polokwane, and give every troop a banking card, which is linked to an account where you pay his danger pay, his daily allowance into. That will allow him to buy whatever he needs on that border duty from whichever shop that's got a got a modem along the border area. General Gatswai on a Friday evening said to me at his house, he said, Johan, you are very expensive, because we said we could do it for 2.8 billion rand. He said, that's a fun thing. He said, and the second thing, there's no back doors in your proposal. Now, let me tell you this. Today, the Border Management Agency, the budget they're looking at is 5.4 billion rand. The way we did it was, instead of people walking patrol, we would put in patrol vehicles so they could drive, because the troops would walk 3 to 5 kilometers out of base for a patrol and camp out for a week and write fictitious reports. According to them, the fence would still be in operation while it was already carried away, and nobody checked. And this is the standard of leadership we have in this country. Now, in 2016, the Defence Force reported they were responsible for an economic upturn in the Northern Province, because they used a debit card system for the troops so they could buy what they needed on the border areas, which comes from my document under copyright. You want to talk about an officer and a gentleman? There ain't such a thing in South African Defence Force. I'm very sorry to say. But the main thing is, we advised them to use shamboks. All these people coming illegal over the border, you don't arrest them, you chase them back with shamboks. What about their human rights? What about our human rights? The problem is that they are all thinking they have a right to come to South Africa because they assisted the ANC in the struggle. And today, Africa says to me all over the show, what is wrong with you South Africans? Because the ANC got everything for Mahala for free. It was a surrender by F.W. de Klerk. Talk about his education. I still wonder.
Okay. Let's talk about the drugs.
But, Mark Liffman has been killed, according to all the newspaper reports this weekend in George.
I read it, yes.
Yeah. When you read a book by Neil de Beer, who was the head of a section from military intelligence in the 80s, running hit squads in the Cape Flats, and their proximity to drugs. When the ANC came into being, it was alleged that the drug lords in the Western Cape came from Tanzania and brought into the Western Cape by Steve Tshwete. The Sequales, Toki Sequales, the family of the Sequales was well known to be involved in the drug trade. And it has just blossomed. We have the Bulgarians today. We have the Serbians today. The fight in the South African Police Crime Intelligence Unit is all about drugs. Who got what drugs? Who's making which money where? I've dealt with the Drug Enforcement Agency, Special Operations Division. They are in no position to take action on any major drug operation in Southern Africa. A small quantity of 5 kilograms, yes, they can handle. Anything above that is way out of their competency. But drug money pushes the world. It pushes America. Trump is going on about Kamala Harris and Harris about Trump. But people do not realize Trump was bankrupt, and it was the Rothschilds that saved his butt, that bailed him out. So who does he belong to? So, Fani Fonse, Fani Fonse has a lot to say. But still he says things sometimes you can listen to. And he said that all drugs in the world, coming out of the Far East, Thailand, Vietnam, the Rothschilds are the first people to get their commissions on all the drugs. In 1969, around there, George Bush Sr., as director of the CIA, wrote a policy document whereby the CIA had a major black account, they call it a black box, to garner funds for off-book operations. And they subsequently became the biggest drug lords in the world. And it is documented today. You can Google it. You will find it. You will find it all over the internet. And it's not a fictitious story. The Panama Papers, I see the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. I've been following the last couple of months how they've been writing about the drug lords congregating in the UAE, being arrested upon the request of the Americans their passports confiscated, and they can't travel. But they can transfer money, and they started building a massive organization because all these drug lords living in the UAE, and they are flooding the world with drugs. Not plastic, with drugs. Whatever's happening in South Africa, amongst all the jurors, I promise you, if we put mandatory drug testing at the doors of the courts, I promise you 70% of all jurists will fail their drug test. And it's not me saying that. I was told that on various occasions. So at South African schools, and especially Afrikaans schools, drugs are around. I'm not talking about heroin or dagga. I'm talking about cocaine. And it gets smuggled. The intelligence services, we've ID'd people and operations. Then they say to me, how many times the investigations have had to be aborted because the police and the Hawks intervened. The Hawks and the police is a house highly divided, and it's all about money. They all forget one thing. You can't take it with you. Alexander the Great showed it when he lied, when they took him out for burial, when he was lying with his hands open on the plank to be buried. But the main thing is they have no regard. And in the meanwhile, the people that's supposed to be working, the middle class, is being destroyed. The black middle class as well as the white middle class. And it all goes back to education as well.
For sure. For sure.
The main thing is, how many druggies are sitting in Parliament? How many? And I'm saying this straight. Glenys Breitenbach, what story will she have to tell? She and Gerrie Nel declined to prosecute Glencore for bribery and corruption, and yet Glencore was found guilty in America and had to pay over $400 million in penalties. But in South Africa, they have been declined to prosecute them. Why? Why? You know, drugs, I've said it before, is coming now, coming down the east coast of South Africa with the monsoon winds blowing. They're coming out of the UAE in their little dhows. They land on the coast, along the east coast, Knysna, Wilderness, you name it. And the drugs get distributed. And what's most interesting, the people implicated will tell me how they read the Bible in the evening for their children. You know, there is a saying, there's a writing, were you but cold, were you but warm, not lukewarm. Julle wat gepleisterde grafte.
Yeah.
And that is a fact. And what is the most interesting is people are putting their heads in the sand. They don't want to see, they don't want to stand up, they don't want to talk.
Yeah, Johan, I see a lot of these things, and there are the things that bother me is where there's a clear-cut indicators that foul play happened, but then the prosecuting arms of the state that are supposed to protect us, the citizens, they don't act.
Yeah, but let me give you an idea. Why? Because let me take Sheila Batoy. I've got no problem with her knowledge, as being a specialist jurist, but she's incompetent. And the reason I'm saying she's incompetent, she's not competent to manage such an organization such as the NPA. That is the big thing, is because she is being sabotaged from internally. Advocate Story Pretorius and Chris McAdam, how they've been running amok as the law, acting illegally. They should have been locked up a long time ago. All right, Pretorius has now left the NPA. Doesn't matter. He should still be made to pay for what he's done. The fact is that the issue of Sisi Kodwa, all charges against him had been dropped. The whole thing of enterprise outsource holding, EEOH, was always about insider trading. It was there. Because you know why? I was the guy who did the COVID investigations. I was undercover doing those investigations. And when I started pointing them out, the contracts were being cancelled. Contracts were being rescinded. And interesting enough, Chris Van Coller, that was appointed as the CEO, is also the chairperson at Leopard Creek estate of Johan Rupert. And the big thing is what's happening. Trevor Manuel is directly involved in all of those issues behind the scenes. That is what I pointed out. And Trevor Manuel is working with Martin Kingston in the Rothschild consultancy firm. And Johan Rupert just happens to be a distant cousin of the Rothschilds. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
I'm telling you now. Hy's 'n neef van die Rothschilds. Agterneef. He's related. But at least he stood up. He made his voice heard for the first time in a long time about the nonsense in Stellenbosch.
Yeah, I heard that.
But the main thing is there's much more to be discovered on what's been going on.
No,
But
for
again,
sure.
it will be covered up in the same fashion as Ursula von der Leyen at the EU, because when she left the German War Department, all the files for procurement had gone missing. Now she is the chairperson of the EU. She's channeling everything by her husband. She's dishonest in the most extreme, but this is a thing we'll talk about next week.
Johan, dankie. It was lekker. Enjoy your evening. And I think about you and about your eyes, man. It's a fuck
It'll
up
come
with
right,
that.
don't worry. It'll come right.
Yeah, I understand, but still, have a great week and dig out some more shit for us to freeze about.
I'll bring you much more. Don't worry, I've made my notes and I'm making notes every day.
Dankie Johan, lekker aand hoor.
Goed gaan. Lekker bly. Ciao. Bye-bye.